Every time I stare at the backlog of games I want to play but don't have the time, I remember how I did not have this problem when I was little. Due to financial and distribution reasons, there were moments when I simply didn't have any new games to play. What then? The internet, as always, is the answer. Simplistic, freely distributed non-commercial games have always been with us, all the way back to posting in a magazine the code of a game that then had to be re-implemented for it to be played. With the rise of the internet though, sites such as Newgrounds with the tagline "Everything by Everyone" became a cultural staple for a segment of gamers in my generation. And that was just the surface. There was a slew of gaming projects you could get for free with wildly varying levels of quality, but that was the charm of what was usually called B games. You never knew what you got. Expectations were non-existent, atrocious games were abound, but some had sparks of brilliance that made wading through the trash worth it. However, with the whole indie revolution, open platform distribution, and even dedicated press for such a subject, the whole mysticism of playing a random free game disappeared. Even the big names of Newgrounds are professional indie developers now, snugly fit in a media landscape wherein everything is a known quantity. But I guess it is inevitable, nothing lasts forever, and the internet is no longer the Wild West it once was. I guess everybody got over B games. Well, maybe not everybody. Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy is a loving homage to the bad but interesting free games of old, shaped in the form of YouTube rage games of the now. Mr.Foddy's claim to fame is the difficult to control runner Qwop, which made the rounds a few years back, and Getting Over It is cut from pretty much the same cloth. A surrealist journey through a single level made out of various stitched together assets wherein you have to guide a man that uses a large hammer as a lever to ascend said level. It looks just about as disjointed as it plays. The controls are made for you to hate them, and you will, which leads me to appreciate the design here, though not while I was playing. You don't control the hammer per se, but rather you control the point towards which the hammer always tries to move, and the hammer will attach itself to anything it touches. These two elements add a lot of subtlety to what is a purely minimalist control scheme due to how easily the hammer can turn against you if you swing about mindlessly. That being said, there is a bit of mouse acceleration that doesn't feel like elegant design. It feels like a compromise to add difficulty to the controls, which contrasts with the other more natural methods that Mr.Foddy employed. But overall, I think the design goal was achieved here. To be frustrating for sure, but to be engaging at the same time. It is so simple to control after all. How can you not make progress? You think to yourself after hours of not making progress. Is it a game for everyone? Certainly not. What good game is? And this is acknowledged in the Steam store description. A game I made for a certain kind of person, to hurt them. That certain kind of person is the one Mr.Foddy wants to communicate to by means of this game, and that communication is actually literal. At certain points of progress, developer voiceovers will play where Mr.Foddy muses about pop culture, game development, and the influence of this game, Sexy Hiking by Czech designer Jazuo. I actually played it after finishing Getting Over It, and I really appreciate how Bennett Foddy uses his game as a means to say something. It is more than just a clone of what he really likes. In fact, I'll go and say that the two are complementary and when played together, actually enhance the experience. So with all that being said, what does Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy actually want to communicate? In the broadest terms, failure is not a punishment in the context of video games, but a necessary step in appreciating them. That's a strong message, especially considering how afraid modern game design is of impeding the player's progress, of putting a wall in front of them not to spite but to actually give a sense of accomplishment. And what I really appreciate here, what makes me respect Mr.Foddy as a designer, is how this message transmits into the level design. The first half of the game is split into a rocky tutorial area for the purpose of learning the controls and a grueling second part made of modern life assets. You can fall all the way back to the beginning in this part, and the last stretch, what is known as the Orange Hell, really lives up to its name. Getting past this particular part will probably make or break most players. But if you do get past, the dopamine rush is quite a thrill. What's really interesting though is how this relates to the second half. The first snowy part removes the threat of losing progress, you can only fall so far, and even the level is more flat, you don't ascend as aggressively as before. In other words, it feels like something proper, digestible, generic, how every other game designer would do it, and it is easily the most boring part of the game. Online you will see little talk of the hat, the anvil or the snowman, and a lot of talk regarding the tunnel, the orange and the bucket. Given the brevity of the game and how meticulously it seems planned, I find it unlikely that this was not intentional by Mr.Foddy. It shows you how the game would turn out if it played up to audience expectations. This is counterpointed by the final part of the game, the bucket and the ice climb, and more specifically, the snake. The loss of progress returns with a vengeance, and riding the snake will take you all the way back to the beginning. Suddenly, the game jumps to life again. Climbing a near sheer cliff of ice is dread-filling, since if you fail badly, you stand to lose everything. Trying to hoist yourself up this mountain an inch at a time suddenly made the ironic tag of psychological horror quite unironic. This area is also marked by the relative silence of the developer and sincerity when he actually does speak.
Have you thought about who you are in this? Are you the man in the pot, Diogenes? Are you his hand? Are you the top of his hammer? I think not. Where your hand moves, the hammer may not follow, nor the man, nor the man's hand. In this you're his will, his intent, the embodied resolve in his uphill ascent.
There are no more witty quotes or witty remarks, but rather just earnest gratitude to the player for making it this far. By this point, the game itself is doing the talking and there is little else to add. Because that is what Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy is about, a dialogue between gamer and developer that gets progressively driven by its ludic elements rather than verbal or written communication. In that context, I have to say that this game has a perfect ending. I'm not gonna spoil what it is, but let's just say it fits with the theme of communication perfectly. In the end, is this title a flavor of the month YouTube rage game meant to cynically gain fame by creating this product at which people get angry while filming themselves playing? Or is it a true hardcore gamers game with deep philosophical musings that only a select few elite individuals can understand? None, really. It is an honest game by an honest game developer trying to make an honest point. It is not facetious in the least, the message is clearly stated from start to finish. This small personal project is meant to communicate with people that appreciate it, with no real spite towards those that do not. It is authorship without pretension, and personally, while I do not know if I got over it, I did enjoy the journey with Bennett Foddy about trying to.
I'm going down the road feeling bad. Lord, I'm going down the road feeling bad.